All right, let's take a look at the first part of this tilt mechanism. I needed the neck to pivot along an axis, so what I did, this is just a draft. I'll probably end up using them. I'm just going to clean them up. But what I did is I created these little inserts that get glued in here, and they allow an axle to go right through from one end to the other. So it can pivot on this axis point right here. And these are beveled at about 12 degrees so that they will line up with my bushings on the neck right here. So once this is on like that, you can see that they line up, and then it'll be able to pivot. So so that's why the neck has these flat areas right here. And then I've got some heat inserts into these mounting holes. They're M3. They're for the actuator. I'll show you that a little bit later. The other thing I built was this interface for the front face, and it accomplishes three things. It's got a little arm that sticks out here with a hole, and on the other end there is a hole for an M4 lock nut, and the lock nut just goes right into there, and that's going to be for where the tilt mechanism gets attached to later. This hole right here is where a speaker will be mounted in there like that for sound clips. And then the last thing this thing does is it has some magnet holes here that attach to the rear head. You can see the mounting, the mating surface for that is right in there. So when it gets put together, they snap into place like that. And what I did is I put glue on that one and attached it to this and snapped it in, and then let it dry like that, so that I knew it was just the right distance away. And that just snaps together so you can take this apart if you need to. So that's my interface. So the interface looks like that when it's mounted into C-3PO's head. The other thing I also did is I just carved away a little bit of this so that when it's on the neck, it actually can tilt down a little bit further. Otherwise it was hitting down here. And so I just took maybe a few millimeters off the bottom. So that's how the tilt system is going to work. Next, what I want to do is show you how the threaded rod that goes through here, this is one that I've cut. This is an M4 threaded rod, and it's going to go through here to let it pivot, but at the same time we need the neck bolts to be attached on either side. So what I did is I 3D printed, actually resin printed some of these little guys. It's a area for a M4 lock nut on one side and a little space for a magnet. This is a 3mm thick magnet, and when it's done it looks like this. You can see the lock nuts in there and the magnets on the other side. So when this goes through the neck, you're going to have a little bit of space to just hand tight that on there. And then on the neck bolt, what I did is I put a pocket in there at 11.5 or 12 degrees to accept this on an angle. And I also put a magnet inside, so when you put them together, they just snap together like that. And they're at the right angle for, goes like this, for the neck. So that's accomplishes two things. It allows the magnet to sit on an angle the way it shows in the movies, and at the same time it allows a horizontal axle here for the whole neck to pivot on. So that's my setup for that. Next I'm going to show you the actuator that I built, and we'll put it together and watch it work. Okay, let's take a look at the 3D modeling that I did for the tilt mechanism for 3PO before we go ahead and put it together. So as you can see here, I've got my extended neck on here. It has some mounting holes. There's 4 of them at the top. And I just put in some M3 heat inserts here because I'll be attaching the mechanism on top. And then you can see the modeled in flat spaces there. They're like bearings for the axis to go through. All right, so from there, I'm just going to show you what I meant by these little end pieces. So you can see that they bevel out at about 12 degrees or so. They get glued into the inside of the face, and then the next axis can go like right through there and everything lines up properly. So this is just a threaded rod. It's M4 threaded rod, and then on top of those I have those little this is actually, yeah, that's right. So this is where the lock nut's going to go to screw into there, and then on this side is where the little magnet's going to go. And then once the magnet's in, the neck bolt will go just snap into there because the neck bolt has a magnet inside of that as well. And that spacing's about right. I'll just leave that there and I'll show you kind of what it'll look like when I add this part here. So you can see there is what the front of the face looks like, and then when you add the back of the head, that neck bolt lines up properly. So that's kind of how I went with the tilt system. So let's just get rid of that for now, and let's get rid of these for now, and let's go on to the actual mechanism that does the tilting. So let's take a look at this. This is a little box I designed to hold the NEMA 17 motor, and the way it works is I put a bearing back here. This is just a skateboard bearing. It's an 809, very common bearing, because there's going to be a threaded rod that goes through here that spins, so that just gets pushed into there. The NEMA 17 motor goes right over here, and it gets put in with 4 I believe they're M3 bolts that go through there. And then the actual, let's go to the worm gear first. Let's go to the threaded rod. Here's a threaded rod. This is a T8 threaded rod, and I cut it down to size, and it gets attached with a coupler. And this coupler here is the same kind of coupler you would find in 3D printers. It connects the 5mm hole for the stepper motor to an 8mm hole for the threaded rod, and there's little grub screws here that hold that on. And when this motor spins, it spins this threaded rod and activates the arm. So let's take a look at that next. So what I'll do is I'll just get rid of the housing so you can see that so far. Now the tilt arm looks like that, and inside of it came with this bearing. So let's actually get rid of that. So this is what the bearing looks like. That looks pretty common. You've probably seen that before in 3D printers. And then the arm that I designed, it goes through there, and there's actually some, through these spots right here, there's some M3 bolts that go through there, and I had to cut them down so they just barely fit through here. Just 2 of them is all you need, with a nut to hold them on. This arm will travel back and forth when this motor spins, and that way it's always locked into position so the head won't flop in any direction. And then it's got this hole here for a magnet. That's that's a 3mm by 8mm magnet, and that will activate the Hall sensor. I'll show you that in a minute. And then up at the top here, there's a slot here for where this whole arm gets attached to the interface for the face. So I'll show you that. Okay, let's take a look at, let's bring back the housing. So it all fits in like that. This slot right here, that's for the Hall effect sensor. The Hall effect sensor will just plug in here. I tried to figure out a way to mount it properly, but things get in the way. So what I did is I ended up just press fitting it in and then gluing it. So this is just a rendering of it. It's actually got the little sensor sticking out here, because what I did on the Hall effect sensor is I took the sensor part and I just bent it over so it's sticking out on this side. When you put the magnet into that hole back there, you have to remember that the magnet has to be facing the right direction to affect the Hall effect sensor switch. So the one way you can do that is when there's power given to the switch, you can just bring a magnet close by and there's a little LED that turns on to show you that it's activated before pressing it in and gluing it in there. Anyways, when the motor turns on, this arm automatically spins and spins this whole arm setup over to this side. The magnet activates the Hall switch and stops it from getting all the way over to the very end. And then from there, let's take a look at the top. There's a top that gets screwed on here. And by the way, there are some threaded heat inserts that go into there as well to hold the top on. So the top gets put on like that, and this whole thing sits on top of the neck. So let's take a look at how it all fits in, so you can see, you know, that's what it's going to look like inside. And then inside of, sorry, let's go get out of there. Let's look at that. There's my interface that I built. It's got a little linkage here, and it looks like this slot does not line up with that hole. I printed it many times and it actually does. I'm not sure why it doesn't in the rendering here, but there's a spot here for a lock nut as well. So once that's put in, you don't actually want to tighten it super tight. You want to have a little bit of leeway so that this thing can pivot back and forth. This hole here is for the speaker that'll be facing forward, and these holes here are for the magnet to attach to the back of the head. So that's kind of what it looks like. And then let's take a look at it like that, so you can see that, you know, it's all together, and believe it or not, it works. So let's build this in real time, and I'll show you how it gets assembled. Okay, let's take a look at the mechanism. This is the linear actuator I built from a stepper motor. I've got the motor mounted in already with some M3 bolts here, 4 of them, and then the wiring harness is facing up. And the coupler here just connects the 5mm shaft to the 8mm T8 threaded rod. And that threaded rod was something like this. This is what I bought off Amazon. It came with the bearing on it, so I just took this and I cut it. Kind of hard to cut, but cut it to the right length, and it just goes through to the other side, just barely sticking out. You don't want it too far, otherwise it could end up hitting the back of the head. And then I put the skateboard bearing in there, just press fit that in, so it has something to spin on. And then the actuator arm itself, I just have show you this way here. There's 2 M3 bolts that go through and get attached on this side with a little nut just to hold it in place. And then this whole thing rides back and forth along this threaded rod. Now the magnet that I put in is just right here. It's just press fit in. And I also press fitted in this Hall effect sensor. And if you're not familiar with this, you can watch my previous video. It explains how this all works. And then I bent the sensor for the Hall effect sensor just over so that it's just sitting flat. And so when this magnet gets into close proximity of that, it'll activate and stop the arm from getting all the way over here, which is the far limit, which is the up movement for his head. So the tilt up, and this is tilt down. And then this is all attached through these holes down here to the top of the neck, which are right there. And the top for this is right here. So it just goes over top like that. It gets attached with some M3 bolts, and they just go through here and sit down flat. hopefully. Here we go. Like that. And then this mechanism here is going to attach to that interface that I showed you previously. I'm just going to turn this on, show you how it activates. All right, I'll just plug it in and you'll see it set up. So it's going to start moving in this direction. You can see the little LED turn on. When it gets to that end, that's the 0 limit. And then from there, it just goes into random back and forth, which will actually be tilt up and down. So the random movements are the random number of steps it moves, the time between the steps is random, and the speed that it moves to the next position is also random. So what we'll do now is we'll assemble it in the head, and I'll show you how it works as it tilts the head back and forth. Okay, here it is inside of the head. You can see that M4 bolt just goes through there, and there's a lock nut on the other side for it, and it's sitting on the neck. And I'll just activate it. You can see how it sets up. Okay, it's turned on. It'll move all the way up. And then go into a random position. Let's just turn this guy around. You can see him move. So it works pretty good. That's the up and down position. Tilting. Never goes beyond its limits. And since you stuck around for the end of this video, I'll give you a quick teaser with both mechanisms working at the same time. I want to save something for my next couple of videos though. So it's going to look all the way to one side and then up, and then go into random positions. There you go. All right, in our next video, we'll look at the electronics and the temporary base station that I made for the head to sit on while we wait for the rest of his body to be built. Thanks for watching, everyone, and stick around for our thought for today.